Hello and welcome to Left, Right and Centre, the only place on primetime television where we'll get you all the sides to the story. I'm Sanket Upadhyay. The Prime Minister is to meet the presidents of all political parties to urge them for a dialogue, among other things, one nation, one election. Now this is a controversial proposal where there is an immediate opinion in binaries. Does it save millions of rupees or not? Does it free up the security apparatus for other jobs or not? Does it help in governance or not? Then there are some frequently asked questions on this proposal. For instance, what happens if a government in the state cannot complete a 5-year term? Will there be president's rule imposed just to ensure this uniformity? There are also concerns of this being an attack on the federal structure. So today we will look at each of these suggestions, concerns, and proposals to hopefully come up with a solution. Modi 2.0's first One Nation, One Poll push. Prime Minister calls for meeting of all party presidents. Left, Mamta, Mulayam, among others, who oppose the idea. Streamlining electioneering versus attack on the federal structure. On Left, Right and Centre tonight, One Nation, One Poll 2.0. Is there once again a consensus conundrum? All right, we'll have an action-packed panel in just a short moment from now. Let me quickly introduce Neerja Chaudhary, senior journalist with me in the studio. Neerja, how do you look at this proposal? We'll begin with the proposal itself. Do you think it is good for our country?
See, I have many questions. You know, on the face of it, if you look at it, yes, if you have elections together, you don't have to have elections every few months, every year, and have the attention of the ruling party or the opposition party is completely diverted into winning the election. Yes, the use of the paramilitary forces or security forces or police is there, which they can be freed. Yes, there will be less money, though I would caution here, let's not bring the money part of it at all, because our democracy is too valuable to be weighed against money. Otherwise, you will tomorrow make a case, Parliament so much halla gulla, nothing gets done, let's shut shop, because too much money is being wasted. So we've got to find solutions rather than bring the money part of it.
Money is an important aspect to talk about.
It is an important aspect, you've got to, but it's not the only aspect to make it, absolute, give it the kind of primacy that is being given. But on the other side, the worrying part of it is 2 or 3 things. One, that, if you have simultaneous elections, then regional parties may get swamped. And, of course, Orissa is an exception.
I was about to come to that, because here is one glorious example since 2004 where they have never ever really felt disadvantaged with the simultaneous election.
So people do think of voting differently. Who they want in the state may be very different from who they want at the centre. For instance, recently everybody wanted Mr. Modi as Prime Minister of India. They voted for the Prime Minister. But in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, only a few months earlier they wanted the Congress. And in Karnataka, while the Congress and the JDS were wiped out, they won the local elections. So people look at things very differently, but in a simultaneous election, my question mark, I don't have a definite opinion on this. Can they just be swept away with, under the influence of one party? But secondly, more important is the majority principle. Suppose a government falls midway. What do? You can't have elections, so a government cannot fall midway, or do you have president's rule, as you were saying, which means central rule, the party in power at the center then has whole sway. Is that a good thing? There are several questions on the flip side which must be asked.
Okay. Let me quickly introduce Pinaki Mishra, who's the BJD MP as well as lawyer. His views are very interesting over here. It's his party which has actually been a beneficiary of simultaneous elections. So he makes a strong pitch for that. He did that earlier in the day to our correspondents inside Parliament. Professor Yogendra Yadav, the National President of Swaraj India, is also with us. We have Lalita Kumaramangalam also joining us, a member of the BJP. In just a short moment, we'll also have former Chief Election Commissioner S.Y. Qureshi also with us. Pinaki Mishra, let me come to you. The arguments that are being made, Mr. Mishra, is that when you have simultaneous elections, when you have one nation, one election, then this argument that is given that we will save money, it will be cost effective, we are making this argument at the cost of transparency, at the cost of ensuring democracy. And also that big point that Neerja Chaudhary was mentioning just a short while ago, what happens if a government falls midway? Then do you impose president's rule just to maintain this uniformity? We would want to know your experience, your party's experience with simultaneous elections.
Look, the other two things that you said, honestly, have no ground at all, completely groundless arguments. But the argument Neerja ji made is the only argument which obtains in a country like India, because we've had so many governments falling, mid-term. The answer is very simple, and our party gave that to the Election Commission in writing, which is the German model under, I think, Article 37 of the German Constitution. It's very clear that you cannot bring a vote of no confidence unless you simultaneously bring a vote of confidence. That, to my mind, completely puts at rest any of these issues that Neerja ji or misgivings that Neerja ji has come up with. There's no need for president's rule, nothing of the sort. Whoever brings a vote of no confidence must simultaneously bring a vote of confidence, which means you must be in a position to form a government if you want to bring a government down. It's as simple as that. So there will be, the tenure of the assembly will always be 5 years, regardless of who's in, who's in pole position, who's in power. I think it's worked very well there. It'll work very well here as well. There's no reason why it shouldn't work well. And let me tell you, the benefits that we've seen from 2004, 9, 14, 19 for the state are incalculable. Mr. Patnaik, you have to understand, Mr. Upadhyay was this rare politician who, in I think the last 3 or 4 decades, has been the only one who's cut short his elected government tenure by a year. Our elections were due in 2005. Atalji called for early elections. He cut short the assembly by 1 year, to the horror of all our MLAs then. Had elections simultaneously, went off perfectly well, and thereafter we've been going coterminous with the central government, and there's been no problems at all. We've had a much shorter period of model code of conduct. There's been massive cost saving. So therefore, whoever says there's no cost saving, etc., is on the wrong track. Look at this now. Straight away we are in it. We've just had a gigantic, exercise of a general election. Within 3 months now, we are in the middle of now three states going to elections. 2020, we have another, half a dozen states which will go into elections. 21, there's massive exercise of Bengal, etc., going to elections. 22, again you have UP, etc., going into elections. 23, further elections, again these Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, and then before you know it, you're in 24 again general elections. So you're in perpetual election mode, and governments just never seem to be able to settle down to follow a firm policy of governance. Everything is geared towards Gujarat elections are coming, so Pepla, Dhakra, whatever, prices of GST have to be tinkered for that. This is not the way a country should be working. A country should be working towards a holistic policy for 5 years that a government has in power. And that can only happen if this distraction of continuously having to pander to various states going into elections at every 3 months, 6 months must end. And we have one election. Give the government.
Okay,
the
fair enough. No, so that's a strong argument for having a one nation, one election policy. But surely there are certain concerns that are raised by many political parties. Mr. Mishra, I'll just come back to you. Yogendra Yadav, a lot of concerns that have been raised by many regional parties. Many, in fact, when the Law Commission held a consultation meeting in July 2018, 4 parties supported, 9 opposed. And among the principal opposition, the key points were, how will you synchronize the terms of assemblies and Lok Sabha? How will that happen? Will the identities not get mixed up, regional as well as national, of these elections?
I heard Mr. Mishra very carefully, and I'm actually surprised because he's a very intelligent lawyer. I think he may be over-reading into his Orissa experience. To my mind, it's a strange thing about our country that we seriously debate outlandish ideas like this and how we can waste national resources, speaking of national resources, that the entire country can focus on an issue of this kind. To my mind, just to give you an example, it is like saying that a bridge on a river is overclogged. We need to do something about it. What would you normally do? You would say, all right, let's regulate the traffic, let's open a new lane, or maybe let's expand the bridge, maybe let's bring the new bridge. But instead, if someone were to say, no, let's change the course of the river, what would you say to that? This is exactly what I think of this one nation, one election idea, because what we are doing, I mean, the irony is that we discuss all this as if it's a minor administrative change. This requires a fundamental constitutional change in the manner of our government altogether. This basically means abandoning our parliamentary system of government. And no, Mr. Pinaki, that is not, the German model is not a solution. It is not a solution because yes, you can say that unless a new government is elected, the old one continues in power. But can you dictate that the legislature will have to pass the budget? In that case, would you have a government that cannot get its budget passed and therefore is unable to pay salaries? I mean, what are we talking about? That changes the entire constitutional government. And more importantly, and I thought people like you would be very attentive to these concerns, it so happens that Odisha has seen one party which has come back to power again and again and again, but that is not a representative example of this country at all. We have large number of states where we have coalitional governments, where governments do change, and the whole premise of parliamentary government is that they are allowed to fall, and if a government fails to enjoy majority, it must go. What about the real issues? Yes, I acknowledge there are some real problems with our election calendars, but the solution lies in addressing those things, and I have three very simple solutions to offer, you know, like improving the lanes and regulating the traffic. Number one, make sure that the draconian provisions of MCC, which require that the whole country comes to a standstill if there are elections in Maharashtra or Haryana, that is silly, that should be changed. Number two, the days of polling which have been stretched unduly to 1 month, 4 phases, etc., should be reduced to not more than 1 week. And number three, the constitution allows for clubbing of state elections, because the election commission can hold elections at any point within the last 6 months of the state assembly's tenure.
So do as much as you can.
Do clubbing, and you would have not more than one election in a year. So why do you need to change the course of the river if the bridge has a problem?
Okay. One moment. Since you've mentioned and critiqued the introductory comment of Mr. Pinaki Mishra, it's only incumbent on me to give him a right to reply. Mr. Mishra, would you like to respond?
Well, you know, look, Mr. Yadav has his point of view. I have my point of view. What he says is that this is going to require some very, very drastic change. Well, it will require a constitutional amendment. There's no question about that. But is that the need of the hour? In my opinion, it is the need of the hour, because this country in the last 25, 30 years has seen that this repeated cycle of elections has had huge economic costs, firstly, because there is going to be an economic cost when you have an eye towards the elections. You are bound to then tinker with the economics. So, you know, good politics makes for bad economics. Everybody knows that. This whole thing of, you know, the election schedule can be compressed, etc. This is not something I'm sure that's possible anymore, because the manner in which these elections are held these days, you know, West Bengal is such a, for instance, a troubled state. It is bound to go into 5 or 6, UP 5 or 6 phases. Once you have these 4, 5, 6 phase elections, then there is no way that you can have a less than, you know, 35, 40 day cycle, which means the model code of conduct has to be then another 30 days, which means you're then looking at a 75, 80 days cycle. In a 365, you know, day calendar, you're looking at, therefore, virtually 1/4, 1/5 of the year gone. Now, you know, that Mr. Yadav might feel that, you know, this is worth it. I don't believe it is worth it, because I think democracy can still be nurtured, can survive. It has nurtured and very happily survived in Orissa when we've had simultaneous elections. There's been no problem at all.
Okay, so you're saying that
let me tell you, this is it's not that the people of this country are no longer aware of the central government, the state government elections. This time there was dual voting on such a large scale. For instance, in Bhubaneswar, Mr. Yadav, you will be happy to hear this because this will actually tickle your physiological palate. The 7 MLA candidates of the BJD got 2 lakh votes more than the MP candidate. So I mean, you can imagine there was 2 lakh votes which were polled in favor of the BJP more than the BJD, and that's how discerning the voters become. In 2 constituencies, the BJP has not won a single MLA seat, Bhubaneswar and Bargarh. Bargarh, we won all 7 where the CM contested. We won all 7 assembly. The BJP won the parliament. So this Indian voters become very, very discerning now. There's no question. It's become very intelligent, and therefore I don't see any problem with democracy flourishing if you have simultaneous elections. Believe you me, I rest my case there.
Okay. Mr. Yogen Yadav, I'm going to come to you. Let me quickly get in a word from Lalita Kumaramangalam also. Lalita, we will have to go into history books to perhaps understand where did it all begin. Because in this country, we began with simultaneous elections. In fact, 1951-52, at that moment, Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabha elections took place together. 57, 62, 67 also they were held together. Yes. It's only in 68 when a few assemblies dissolved.
Yes.
And then you had the split of the Congress party, and since then you have a need in our democracy where we have separate elections. Now can we rewind the clock and create a sort of or press a reset button where everything comes on the same page? Is it possible, is what I want to know.
Look, let's make one thing very clear here, that the effort that is now being made by the Prime Minister and other people who think the same way as the BJP is to see exactly if this can actually be done. Now, there are arguments both for and against, but what I agree with Mr. Pinaki Mishra is that Indian democracy has really matured. This time it was not just in Orissa where double voting took place, it happened in my own state of Tamil Nadu, where actually the DMK won more seats in the assembly, in the few seats, I think the 19 seats that went to poll simultaneously with the Lok Sabha, and the ADMK barely held all with 9 seats. So it's not that people do not understand what is at stake for them nowadays, both at the state and in the center. One could say that the Tamil Nadu voter is better informed, etc., but I really think that voters across the country understand exactly what's at stake for them and what they want to do and where they want to vote. I think we're doing them a disfavor by using them as a sort of excuse for not even considering this idea of simultaneous elections. The truth also is that governance suffers. It's not just money we are talking about here. Look at the amount of troops that are deployed in order to ensure that elections take place freely and fairly throughout the country. It's not just one state or in several states, for example. And how much time is wasted when central government employees and the police are, time and again every year for about 2 to 3 months deployed for election duty. Not only does the code of conduct stop a lot of administrative work of the government that should be done in normal course of events, but also it is an enormous pressure put on not just the state but the center, both. The election commission of course is permanently in election mode, but it's also an enormous amount.
Lalita, it's the problems. I understand the point that you're making. Mr. Mishra has spoken about it.
I think I've lost you.
Can you hear me? Okay, we'll try to fix that. We'll try to fix that audio and come back again. Yogendra Yadav, would you like to respond? Because Mr. Pinaki Mishra seems to suggest that at this moment, okay, we'll go back to Pinaki Mishra also in just a short moment. I want to bring you in. You've heard, you started with the opening comment, and now I come back to you, Neerja. The arguments are passionate, right? So there is an argument that this is Yogendra Yadav's line of thought, which almost borders on this attacking the pluralist sort of a structure, right? There was a reason why these elections were being fought separately, because there was a need created. We went down the history lane as well. And then there is the practicality of it. Do we need to save money in practicing our democracy? Yes, we do. Do we need to make it feasible and practical? Yes, we do. How far can we go? That's why I asked you the question, is there a need? Do you think there is a need?
I think I would go along with this, yes, the practical part of it, the money, yes, we have to be careful, prudent on money, but as I said at the beginning, money cannot be, should not be the criteria. It is an important factor to value our, or to weigh the value of our parliamentary democracy. It's too important, too precious to only say, paisa lag raha hai, itna kharch ho raha hai. That's not debate. I would look at it. Number two, practicality, also constitution amendment, but I would think that that's not an important thing. If many parties come on board in the Rajya Sabha and support the BJP in this, you may well hit the 2/3 majority mark. Otherwise, the BJP hopes to hit it next year. So I don't think that is an important factor. I think I would go along with Yogendra Yadav. It's the spirit of our parliamentary democracy. It's our federal structure which we value. I think those are the issues we need to look at much more, you know, where that is going to hit us. And I would say, you know, if the
and we
regional...
should not measure it in money.
Alone. That's not the only factor I feel. But, you know, also, if the regional parties, I fear if you have simultaneous elections, the regional parties will get affected, will get damaged, their chances will not be what they are today. Therefore, are we looking at promoting, you would say, a two-party system, which has been the talk over the decades? One nation, one election, can it lead to one party? You make a case for 10 years down the line.
That's exactly, and when we talk about
those are the worries.
When we talk about the Odisha model, this is exactly what the Odisha model tells us, that it does not happen this way.
No, but Odisha model, let me just say, Odisha model, Pinaki Mishra was absolutely right. You've had a very tall leader in Odisha. You've had a party which the people have gone for. So no matter who is at the center, they will vote, but they've turned to Naveen Patnaik. Now at the center, people have turned to Narendra Modi, but you know, people may turn at the state level to somebody else. They may want, they may want to promote checks and balances in the states, so that it is not a one-sided decision making at the center also, the people you send into the Rajya Sabha from the states. So I think we need to think, I think a national debate is called for. It's a very healthy thing.
That's a very important
The Prime
point.
Minister has taken a very important initiative. We should look at all aspects.
So you do admit that this is an important initiative?
It's a very important.
Okay,
yes,
Yogendra Yadav, panelists feel that this is an important initiative. It's an important initiative, and obviously we can have a debate on this issue, whether it is feasible or not. Do you think that this calls for a nationwide debate on its feasibility? For instance, if we were to save some money in practicing our democracy, and if we were to factor certain changes in making it more effective, what is the harm?
Important, of course it is. Anything good or bad, if it's as big as this, is important. Debate, of course, is called for. Any good or bad proposal ought to be debated, and I hope it will be debated. The question we should be asking is, priority of all the electoral reforms that are needed in this country, of the dozens of suggestions that Election Commission has been making, of the dozens of suggestions that Association for Democratic Reforms has been making, should this be our top priority? I've heard 2 or 3 things in the debate. One is, and I'm really surprised, so are we saying that we cannot possibly change the movement of security forces in elections and cannot reduce it from 6 phases to 4, which is a purely executive decision? We cannot change model code of conduct, and it's somewhat ridiculously restrictive things, which is merely a all-party consensus, but we can change the constitution. That I thought was a very somewhat incongruent argument. There's an argument about money. The problem with money is not of elections. The problem with money is that the actual spending is several times more than the legal limit. Please do something about that. That is the real problem, not this one. And I also heard this thing about splitting, which is voters are getting smart, they can distinguish. Of course, you are right. It began with Karnataka in 1980s, and this time Odisha has shown that voters are becoming more discerning, that they can distinguish. But that is not the question we should be asking. The question is not whether voters can distinguish state and parliament and can vote differently. The question is whether holding the two elections together, even for a discerning voter, does it give the national party some advantage, whether it is 2%, 3%, 4%? That is what we should be asking. To my mind, and I endorse the point that Nirja Chaudhary was making, that what it does is that it tilts the electoral plane. The playing ground is tilted. We don't know 2%, 4 degrees, we don't know. But it tilts that in favor of a national party.
No,
This case happens to be.
No, but you know, Mr. Yogen Yadav, this is exactly what Pinaki Mishra, Mr. Mishra, let me come back to you. I mean, your argument is exactly this, that if we were to give an advantage necessarily to a national party, it would have happened in Odisha. But would you not agree with the assessment that Odisha may be one small example, but to implement this entire exercise at a national level will require far more consensus and far more efforts, Mr. Pinaki?
Sanket, let me just first immediately, mention one thing, that here, are we really missing the woods for the trees is what I seem to think, because are we talking, we are not talking about the saving of a few hundreds of crores as far as election expenses are concerned. Please, I'm talking about macroeconomics. I'm talking about the fact that an elected central government is unable to bring in any far-reaching reforms, whether it is labor reforms, land reforms, land acquisition reforms, agricultural reforms. You are not able to bring in any kind of far-reaching reforms because you are perpetually on election alert. That's what I meant. So, and that is, we are talking about lakhs of crores. We are not talking about some piffling, few hundred crores of election expenses, etc. Please. So, if somebody is missing the woods for the trees, I'm sorry. The idea of simultaneous elections is because a government must have the traction to have a 5-year mandate to be able to bring about far-reaching reforms which are very, very important for the country. That's what I meant. Now, and as far as, the advantage, disadvantage for regional parties, etc. is concerned, look, that's what I said. People in Andhra Pradesh, for instance, people wanted Jagan Reddy because they thought he was an attractive alternative. Orissa, they thought Naveen Patnaik was the attractive alternative. They kept him going for the 5th term. If there is an attractive alternative narrative, and Mr. Yogendra Yadav has consistently talked about that in the last 5 months very intelligently, and I hail him for that. The fact is, there was no attractive alternative this time, which is why the people overwhelmingly decided they wanted to give Mr. Modi a 2nd term at the center. So therefore, as long as you don't present the attractive alternative, people are going to continue to vote in a particular way. This has got nothing to do with A party, B party, C party. And I genuinely believe that let the debate start. I think it is a debate worth considering, because for the reason I said, that a government must get a 5-year span to be able to work. You cannot give a government 3 months, 5 months, and then immediately push them into every state election here, thanks to our media, really becomes a national election virtually. The amount of interest in every state election is no less than a national election. Every time a central government loses a state election, it's as though there is a referendum against it. You know that.
Why blame the media? I mean, this is a high prestige battle for the political
power
class.
the media has. That's what I meant. I'm genuinely complimenting the media for the power you have now over the minds and hearts of people. But every state election that a party loses now, it becomes like a referendum. So therefore, no party is willing today to take risks to lose any state election, even if it is a very small election where there is 1 or 2 MP seats involved. Nobody wants to lose that. And that's the problem we have. So therefore,
No,
my idea was,
let's
that's
do
what
one
Naveen
thing.
Patnaik's idea is, give a central government enough traction. That's
I
it.
think we have established beyond doubt that there is a need for a debate on this issue, right? So that has been established. I'm sure Mr. Yogen Yadav also does not disagree. Lalita Kumaramangalam, let me come to you and let's talk about the various aspects. I'll come back to the legal aspects of how this can be done, the constitutional aspect of how it can be done.
Okay.
But first, let's talk about certain situations or certain fears that are being addressed. For instance, only now, there's a comment, there is a concern that has come from one of the producers in the team. They say, just imagine if there is a situation where, forget the state government, what if the central government falls? What if the central government does not have the requisite numbers? Then what happens?
But Sanket, as Pinaki ji has pointed out, that there is already a sort of fail-safe, a break in that situation, that you can't bring in a no confidence motion unless you can say that you have the numbers to replace a government that's currently in place. So I don't think that should be a major worry, and we are not looking, I mean, nobody is saying that it's going to be done overnight. This is going to take a while. We need to start discussing this because there are far too many advantages to this, not just to a central government or a single party, but to every state. Think about it. If you are constantly in poll mode and regional parties are constantly, given the way Indian elections today are run, bad-mouthing each other, the people in the center and at a particular state, when are we going to be able to sit down and work out how best the center and a state government, assuming that they are from different parties, can sit down and work for the development of that state? And obviously, the states put together make the federation. So when a state is weakened, a federation is also weakened.
Okay.
And we need to at least consider that any government, not just the center, the state government also needs 5 years, because there's an enormous number of items on the state list and the concurrent list where they need 5 years to be able to
I think the point that is being made over here, Neerja Chaudhary,
do otherwise.
Neerja Chaudhary, the point being made over here is that money is only one of the arguments, that you'll save money, right, in the process of electioneering.
Yes.
The other argument is that it will make governments more efficient, right? It will increase efficiency. Now, I want to know from you, what can solve this? Is this purely fear that elections should not be held simultaneously, or should people give it an honest thought? Maybe debate this through, and if there are certain problems, thrash them out.
That of course goes without saying. As I
Yeah.
said, not only the Prime Minister's initiative tomorrow called it the party leaders, very welcome, and I think there should be a national debate all across on this, and even those with 1-2 members in the house, or even not members, everybody's voice should be heard, because we are all involved in this whole process and what happens to the system. On just one point that I want to raise with Pinaki Mishra,
Sure.
you said, for instance, that the government may want to go in for economic reforms, labor reforms, but if there are elections down the line, it becomes very difficult. So are you saying it becomes difficult to sell the idea of economic reforms, labor reforms to your electorate in another state, and therefore your hands are tied? In other words, is that the thing to do at all? If it's going to be such a unpopular measure with the large number of people, that should you not look at that kind of a measure again?
Okay, Mr. Pinaki Mishra?
Neerja ji, you're far too experienced to even ask me this question. Surely you know, in the life of a nation, bitter pills sometimes have to be both delivered as well as swallowed. You are aware of that. India particularly, we certainly need many, many bitter pills going forward if we are going to become a very, very large, $5 trillion economy that the Prime Minister is thinking of, and that all of us are thinking of. If it's going to be a $5 trillion economy, then we cannot keep trundling in the manner in which we are trundling. If we are going to be, really going head to head, toe to toe with a country like China, which we have to, because without that, in the long run, in the next 50 years, 100 years, when much after all of us are gone, we are going to be at a huge disadvantage, and we should not leave people following us in our generations to come at that huge disadvantage, because we had to succumb to politics in the short term because of this continuous cycle of elections. I genuinely believe that. My Chief Minister believes that. And he is therefore quite passionately and fervently of this idea. Otherwise, Neeraj, he wouldn't have cut short. You know that. No Chief Minister in this country in living memory in the last 30, 40 years has done this. He cut short a term by 1 year. The MLAs were absolutely aghast that they had lost 1 year of their tenure in 2004 when elections were due in 2005. He brought that election forward in 2004, and he has continuously thereafter had the confidence, and that's really what is needed. If you have the confidence, no matter you are delivering the bitter pill, you are still able to sell your ideas to the people, and that's what we've done in Orissa. Thanks to Mr. Patnaik.
Let me get in Mr. Yogen Yadav's view on this, because obviously Pinaki Mishra will talk about the success. We have to admit that Odisha is a living example of this model at a small scale, but a living example. Can it be replicated nationwide? Yogen Yadav, very quickly, and then after that we'll talk about the legality and constitutionality.
May I request you not to overdo the Odisha thing, because to my mind it's a very, very special case for some of the reasons
How
that
so?
Neeraj has already spelled out, some that I mentioned before. And on this show, I really don't want to get into the very special equation that BJP and BJD enjoyed in the election today. Everyone in the world knows about it, but this is not the show on which we should be debating the peculiar relationship BJP and BJD had in this election. So all I would say is let's draw conclusions about the whole of the country based on that very special situation. On the larger, I think Pinaki Mishra raises a very large and important question, which is different from the question of money spent on elections, which is about the larger economic policy of the country. And I take the point that if the time horizon of a government is shortened, then its ability to take long-term decisions is significantly compromised. And that is why, in fact, I had made some of the suggestions that I did, that actually Election Commission can use the existing constitutional power to club some of the state assembly elections and reduce those at least 8 or 9 elections that happen in between 2 parliamentary elections to something like 5. That would help. At the same time, I would say, quite in line with what Neeraj has been saying, that we have to balance between democratic accountability and a long-term policy time horizon. If there are government, if I were to spell out what Pinaki Mishra is saying, what some people say, maybe not him, but many economists say, is that if you have to push certain kind of economic policies, that can be done only behind the back of the people or by ignoring them. I'm sure Pinaki Mishra does not say that, but that is an argument which is made, and that, I believe, is a very undemocratic argument. In a 5-year of tenure,
what he refers to as the bitter pill.
1 year check in some part of the country, it has an element of democratic accountability.
Okay.
If there are certain policies that you cannot push through during elections, maybe you shouldn't puch those policies.
Okay, that's exactly the same point that Neeraj Chaudhary was also making.
I want to remind Pinaki ji about something that actually some of the hardest economic reform decisions in this country were taken during unstable government. So the idea that you need a stable government with clear 5-year horizon and only then do you take bold policy decisions, that's factually not correct. That is not what the evidence of the last 25 years shows us.
Reminds me of Shankar Iyer's book, Accidental India, where every big reform was basically an accident in this country. Pinaki Mishra, very quickly. First of all, a comment on your special relationship with the BJP, right, which Mr. Yogen Yadav briefly touched upon. And then secondly,
again,
I don't want the show to be on those things.
Yeah.
Let me straight away say, I'm vastly surprised that somebody as intelligent as Mr. Yadav should even allude to this sort of thing on your show, because I think if he sees the numbers, he sees the fight on the ground, the one state where the BJP, Mr. Amit Shah, went hammer and tongs saying 120 plus, where the Prime Minister went and told in a public meeting that Mr. Patnaik, your time is up, you have to go gracefully, otherwise we will throw you out.
And your own
there's
contest.
never been a more savage fight on the ground. There's never been a more savage fight on the ground, let me tell you, than we've had in this last election. But elections are over, the rankers behind us, we have 5 years now ahead of us. And that's why I said, look, you know, the 12 BJD MPs, the 8 BJP MPs, and the lone
Lalita,
Congress
this
MPs,
question,
we have to all
I
work
think this
together.
question is important. If you talk about a bitter pill, certain decisions that have to be taken, and this constant electioneering hampers, Yogendra Yadav and Neerja Chaudhary feels that this is a case of you trying to push a difficult economic decision which may or may not make good political sense, thus is not required in the first place. It's an argument. You may or may not agree. Pinaki first and then Lalita.
Look, you know, the hard fact is that everybody knows and everybody talks about it, that the decisions a government can take in a honeymoon period when it's just been elected or re-elected to power can never be taken in an election year. That's the hard fact of life. People who fight elections know about it. And I think people who study elections also know about it. So therefore, it's the fact that certain hard decisions have to be taken, which perhaps might be unpalatable, you know, in the long run, unfortunately have to be taken because the life of a nation is beyond a particular election or the happiness of people in the short run. The happiness of a nation in the long run is more important than the happiness of people in the short run.
Lalita,
so
very
therefore,
quickly.
I'm sorry, I am not in agreement with those who feel that these decisions ought not to be taken.
That's why
sometimes unpopular decisions must be
one
taken.
nation, one election is an interesting debate, which apart from TV studios should also happen in the political spectrum. The Prime Minister is initiating this. Maybe in Parliament also we'll see a debate. Lalita Kumaramangalam, the last word.
I agree with what you say, Sanket, that at least the debate must be allowed to take place. And largely, there is a lot of truth in what Mr. Pinaki Mishra says, that governments, regardless of whether they are at the state or the centre, can take some very, very hard economic decisions and political decisions immediately after they have been elected, say the first year or two of their tenure, which is almost impossible in the last 2 years just before elections. And we need to look at this from a long-term view, regardless of whether, again, here we are talking about the national parties or the regional parties. The long-term view has to be given precedence, because a nation's age is far, you know, greater, and a nation's existence or well-being, welfare, development, etc., is far more important than merely looking at things in a short term.
This is going to make for a very, very compelling debate in the
years
hopefully to come, because this is not something which is
a nightmare if we don't take some very hard decisions.
Okay, Lalita ji, many thanks for joining us. Pinaki Mishra, thank you so much. Thank you for thinking that the media is so powerful, that we are the movers and shakers. Yogendra Yadav as well as Neerja Chaudhary. Thank you so much on this very engaging debate number 1.